I still remember that moment like a cold blade tearing through what should have been a joyful dinner. My 26th birthday, but instead of cake or well wishes, my father threw an envelope straight onto the wooden table. His voice was dry, final. Starting next month, if you want to stay in this house, you'll pay rent. Otherwise, pack your things and leave. The small kitchen in the suburbs of St. Louis fell into complete silence, broken only by the heavy ticking of the clock. I gripping my fork until my knuckles went white, feeling as though I'd been erased from my own family. My mother, without hesitation, added another cut. Maybe that will teach you to be grateful. I bit down hard on my lip, forcing down the lump in my throat while my brother Ryan, the golden child always treated like treasure, leaned back and smirked, his eyes brimming with satisfaction. That night, in the house I once believed was the safest place in the world, I realized they no longer saw me as a daughter. Only as an ungrateful tenant. And that was the moment everything began to collapse. I staring at the envelope on the table in silence, but my mind spun with hundreds of memories rushing back. I wasn't lazy. I wasn't clinging to them the way they made me out to be. Since I was 19, I had stepped out on my own to work. My first job was at a small bookstore in downtown St. Louis. The pay was little, the shifts stretched late into the evening, but for me it was the first sign of independence. I still remember the first morning I buttoned up that blue uniform, standing behind the cashier counter, my chest swelling with pride. I thought my parents would be proud too. But that evening, when I placed my first paycheck on the table, my father barely glanced at it before saying, "What good is that? Selling books doesn't fill anyone's stomach." My mother chuckled lightly, adding, "Ryan is different. Our son is studying IT, a bright future ahead." Well, daughters take temporary jobs, but sooner or later they'll rely on a husband. I forced a thin smile, swallowing the sting of her words. Back then, I told myself they were joking, that things would change once I proved myself. But little by little, those jokes turned into a refrain, repeated so often I no longer knew if I was truly their daughter or a shadow in that house. When I moved on to an office support job, nothing glamorous but steady, I thought at least they'd be less harsh. I worked 8 hours a day plus the commute, coming home exhausted. I paid for my own needs, never asking them for a cent. But what did I get in return? One evening, as I pulled out my chair at the dinner table, my father looked at me and asked, "Did you do anything important today? Or shuffle useless papers again?" I answered softly, "I managed the data section. They said I was quick and careful." He scoffed, shaking his head. "Keeping records won't do anything for this family. Look at Ryan. A big company is already noticing him. A son is a real support." My mother piled more food into Ryan's bowl, her voice full of pride. "Our boy might get promoted soon. Daughters, well, they should find a husband to make life easier." I swallowed my rice quickly, throat tight. Ryan leaned back in his chair, smirking. "If you didn't live here for free, you probably wouldn't have a dime left." I stayed quiet. I had learned silence because every time I talked back, it only made things worse. But inside, each word cut like a small blade, deepening wounds that never healed. The nights grew heavier. I came home late, sweat still on my shirt, but instead of concern, I got my father's disappointed stare. My mother turned away, clicking her tongue. She doesn't help with anything all day and still comes home late. Such a burden. I asked myself, when did my effort to stand on my own become a weight on their shoulders? Once, I tried confiding in my mother, saying I wanted to take a certification course to move up at work. She scoffed. "Investing in you is like pouring water into sand. A daughter should save money for her husband and children, not waste it on that." Those words clung to me day after day. Meanwhile, Ryan was spoiled more and more. The house revolved around him. My father asked about his work. My mother served the best dishes. Me. If I forgot to take out the trash once, my father roared, "Useless. Raising you is a waste." Ryan always smirked at those moments, like my existence only highlighted his success. I started avoiding them. After work, I wandered the supermarket aisles or sat quietly in a cheap cafe, dragging out every minute before going home. I'd rather watch streetlights through the window than hear one more sneer. One time, my cousin Emily came over and caught my father snapping harsh words at me. When he left the room, she whispered, "I know it's hard. But don't argue. Let them talk and they'll forget." But deep down I knew, they wouldn't forget. It wasn't a passing comment anymore. It had become their habit, the lens through which they saw me. The scratches didn't show on the surface, but they built up each day, festering and aching. I knew someday they'd become wounds too deep to mend. That night, after my birthday turned into a trial, I stayed in my room under the yellow lamp light. I opened my notebook, flipping through pages filled with work notes and small plans I had once dreamed of. I thought I could prove my worth through diligence. But to my parents, all of it meant nothing. I still remember the chill that ran down my spine when I heard my father say, "Rent." It wasn't about money. It was a declaration that I was no longer part of this family. I closed the notebook and sat for hours, my thoughts tangled. I didn't yet know what I would do next. I only knew that each word they had thrown had become stones, stacking higher and higher, pressing the air out of my lungs in the place once called home. That evening, I came home later than usual. A 10-hour shift had drained me completely. The mix of sweat and office paper still clung to my shirt. When I set my bag on the floor and looked toward the dining table, everyone was already seated. A pot of stew steamed in the middle, its aroma filling the kitchen, but it carried no warmth. My father's eyes were ice cold as they met mine. I panted softly, then said, "I'm sorry. Could we delay dinner a little? I'd like to shower first." The room froze for a beat. My father slammed his spoon down, his voice sharp as glass. "Parasite." My heart pounding. I had heard cruel words before, but never this clipped, this merciless. Ryan, mouth still smeared with sauce, looked up with a mocking grin. "If you're too busy to eat with us, maybe I'll turn your room into my gaming room. No point wasting space." The words slipped out casually but pierced me like a knife. My lips trembled as I stared at him, unable to believe my own brother could treat my place like disposable trash. My mother calmly wiped her hands on a napkin and said evenly, "Good idea. Maybe we'll clear her room tomorrow." That room was the only space in the house where I still felt I existed. I had saved to buy the small wooden desk, hung old paintings from the flea market, lined up books neatly on the shelf. And now they spoke of clearing it out as though it were an unused storage room. I pressed my lips together, throat locked tight. I wanted to protest, to scream that I wasn't a burden, that I had contributed to this household too. But the words shattered inside me. My hands trembled as I pulled out a chair and lifted a spoon to the cold soup in front of me. No one noticed me. The table carried on with its own chatter, Ryan's quiet laughter mixing with the clink of dishes. In that moment, I knew with certainty, I no longer had a place in this family. I remained at the same table, feeling like nothing more than a ghost. After dinner, I quietly retreated to my room. With the door closed, I sank onto the floor, knees pulled up, tears spilling out uncontrollably. The words from earlier echoed one by one as if carved into the walls. Parasite. Wasting space. Clear out her room. I couldn't breathe. I looked around the familiar room, once my only refuge from the endless arguments. Every item had been placed by my own hands. The wooden chair bought from a thrift store. The quilt hand-sewn by my grandmother. Each piece was proof of my small effort to carve out a corner of peace. But tonight it no longer felt safe. I opened the closet. With trembling hands, I pulled out an old duffel bag and began stuffing in a few clothes, my laptop, some books, a pair of shoes. I had no plan, only the certainty that I couldn't spend another day in this house. Laughter drifted from the living room, mixed with Ryan's smug voice. "Her room's big. Tomorrow I'll set up my gaming desk in there." I froze, my hands tightening around the bag's strap. Tears welled up again, but this time they weren't from hurt. They were from resolve. I grabbed a few more essentials, crammed everything into 2 large bags. As I zipped them shut, the faint rip of the zipper sliced through the silence, sealing the choice I was about to make. The clock on the desk crept close to midnight. I slipped on my jacket and quietly opened the door. My footsteps were soft on the wooden floor, but each heartbeat thundered in my ears. I was afraid my parents might hear, might stop me, though deep down I knew they wouldn't. They wanted me gone, didn't they? As I dragged the bag toward the front door, light spilled from the crack of the living room. My father's shadow flickered in the glow of the television. He stayed glued to the screen, not even glancing at me as I passed. I held my breath and walked faster. My hands shook violently as I touched the doorknob. I turned to look one last time at the hallway. Family photos lined the wall, including one of me as a little girl, smiling wide. The sight pierced straight through me. I opened the door, hauled the bags outside, and closed it softly behind me. I placed them in the trunk of my car and slid into the driver's seat. My grip on the steering wheel went white-knuckled. My body trembled from fear and from release. That night, I left in silence without a note. I knew even if I wrote one, no one would read it with understanding. They would mock me, accuse me of exaggerating. The empty road stretched ahead. Streetlights glowed pale yellow over the asphalt, leading me toward an uncertain future. I didn't know where I was going, didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But I couldn't go back. In the darkness, tears streamed down my face, carrying a different weight this time, the weight of an irreversible decision. I pressed the gas pedal and left it all behind. I don't remember how long I drove that night. When I finally stopped, the clock was close to 3 a.m. My phone buzzed with missed calls from my parents, but I didn't answer. Exhausted, I dialed Naomi, my best friend since high school. Her sleepy voice crackled through the speaker. "Clarissa? Oh my God, do you know what time it is?" I choked out. "I'm sorry for bothering you, but could I stay with you for a few days?" Without hesitation, Naomi replied, "Come over. I don't care what time it is. Drive safe." Naomi's apartment was on the third floor of an old complex in South St. Louis. When I arrived, she was already at the door, wrapped in a thin sweater, cradling a steaming mug of tea. Her eyes swept over me, full of worry. "Clarissa, you look awful." I pressed my lips together, forcing a faint smile. "I need a place to sleep. I'll explain tomorrow." She didn't press further. She pulled the heavy bag from my hands, set it in the corner of the living room, laid a blanket across the sofa, and patted my shoulder. "Rest. We'll figure everything out in the morning." That night, I curled up on the sofa. The unfamiliar room felt more peaceful than any place I had known in years. Yet in the quiet darkness, my parents' words from dinner echoed, drowning me in shock. I broke down, sobbing until sleep finally claimed me. The first days at Naomi's, I drifted like a castaway. I went to work during the day, then lay silently staring at the ceiling at night. Naomi often stayed by my side, patiently waiting for me to open up. One evening, she handed me a glass of water and asked, "What really happened?" I took a deep breath and told her everything. The birthday dinner, the envelope of money, my father's insults, Ryan's smirk, and the silent decision to walk out. By the time I finished, Naomi's eyes were wet. "You've carried too much, Clarissa. But at least now you have the right to choose your own life." I thought of my old room, the paintings, the quilt from my grandmother. The idea of them clearing it out made me feel hollow, as if all air had been sucked from my lungs. Text messages poured in from my family. My phone buzzed constantly. "Selfish, abandoning your family. Ryan will move into your room. You've disgraced us in front of relatives." Each one cut deeper. I read them and quietly locked the screen. The less I replied, the harsher their tone grew. Eventually, I switched the phone to silent. A week later, I decided to return to the old house at midday, knowing my parents would be at work. I needed to collect a few boxes, mementos I couldn't lose. Naomi offered to come, but I refused. I wanted to face it myself. When I opened the door to my room, I froze. The space that once held my breath was empty. The paintings were gone. The bed I'd saved months to buy vanished. Only faint dents on the floorboards showed where furniture had been. In the center stood a brand new computer setup, a large monitor, glowing keyboard. Nearby, several cardboard boxes marked with black marker, "Ryan's stuff." Just 1 week and they had erased me completely. I checked the closet. Empty. I pulled open the desk drawers. Only crumpled scraps of paper remained. The quilt my grandmother sewed? Gone. The teenage journals I had hidden under the dresser? Gone too. I sank to the floor, clutching my shirt, fighting back tears. Suddenly, the sound of a key turning echoed. My mother's voice carried in, "Ryan, I'm home." I shot to my feet, panic racing. No place to hide. I stepped into the hallway. She stopped short at the sight of me, then quickly masked her surprise with calm. "Oh, Clarissa. You should have called first. Where are my things? We needed space for Ryan. Your stuff's in the garage." I struggled to keep my voice steady. "Why didn't you tell me?" She shrugged, a thin smile on her lips. "You left. The ones who stay need the room. Do you have a problem with that?" I went straight to the garage. There, shoved into a dusty corner, were a few boxes scrawled with my name. Inside were old clothes and a handful of books, tossed together carelessly. The most precious things were gone. I clutched the box to my chest and walked outside. My mother lingered in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes cold. "Do you really want to live away from family that badly?" she asked. I pressed my lips tight, said nothing. I loaded the box into my trunk and slid behind the wheel. In the rearview mirror, I watched her turn back inside without a second glance. I started the engine, driving away from the familiar street, feeling as though I had buried a part of my life. Emptiness swelled inside me, but along with it came a faint push. I couldn't let them keep crushing me. I returned to Naomi's apartment with the box from the garage, my chest heavy. Naomi was waiting in the living room with 2 cups of coffee on the table. She pulled the box closer, opened it, and peeked inside. Silence lingered before she sighed. "How could they? Where's your grandmother's quilt? The journals you always showed me. All gone. As if I never lived there." Naomi's eyes grew distant. After a pause, she hesitated. "There's something. I don't know if I should tell you." "Say it." She took a sip of coffee, lowering her voice. "I ran into Mrs. Wilson, your old neighbor. She said your father refinanced the house last year to borrow money for Ryan's startup. But that company is bleeding money." "You mean, the whole rent thing wasn't about making me more responsible, but about making me cover Ryan's debt?" "Exactly." Mrs. Wilson said the bank came by several times. They're worried but kept it quiet. So all the sneers, all the harshness weren't about disappointment in me. They needed me to become a backup wallet. They were ready to call me a parasite to hide the truth, that they were the ones clinging to me. The scattered pieces began to fit together. The sudden demand that I pay rent. Ryan being spoiled to the extreme. It all led to one point. I was their emergency plan for the debt they were carrying. Naomi put her hand on my shoulder, her voice firm. "Clarissa, you can't let them turn you into a stand-in anymore." That night, I picked up my phone and scrolled through every message. Each line lit up. "Selfish child abandoning your family. Ryan will move into your room. You've disgraced us." I started taking screenshots, saving everything. Even the cold voicemails from my mother, my father's angry shouts left in the inbox. I created a separate folder on my laptop, naming it simply, Evidence. Naomi watched me, worry in her eyes. "What are you going to do with all of that?" "At the very least, I need to remember the truth. So when they twist the story, I won't doubt myself anymore." A week later, my father called. I stared at his name on the screen, hesitated for a few seconds, then answered. His voice was hoarse, trying to sound casual. "Clarissa, where are you? You need to come home. We have something to discuss." He went on. "Actually, your mother and I are having a little trouble with the bank. Just temporary. If you could help out for a few months, everything would be fine." "Help out for a few months? You mean I'd be covering Ryan's debt, right?" There was silence for a few seconds on the other end, then his tone snapped sharp. "Who told you that? Don't believe that nonsense. This is your family. Family has to carry the weight together." I hung up before he could say more. My heart pounded, but my mind was clear. They would never admit it. They would keep calling it responsibility, keep blaming me if I refused. I opened my laptop and added that call to the list. Every detail carefully noted. A few days later, I told Naomi about the call. She frowned. "They really want to drag you into that hole of debt. You need to prepare better." From that moment, I lived 2 lives. Working by day, then at night combing through data, organizing every piece of evidence, step by step preparing for the day I'd have to face them directly. The small rented room, its yellow walls peeling, the lamp casting dim light on an open journal. Suddenly the phone rang, Mom flashing on the screen. I hesitated for a long time before answering. Her voice cut through, cold and final. "If you don't come back, then you're no longer our daughter." Those words cut deeper than any blade. I tried to respond, but my throat closed up. I only managed a broken "Mom" before the line went dead, leaving a suffocating emptiness. I dropped the phone on the bed, burying my face in my hands. Tears poured out uncontrollably. After years of trying to be the easy child, the end was being erased by my own mother. Naomi knocked and stepped inside, finding me curled up, trembling. Alarmed, she asked, "Clarissa, what happened?" I handed her the phone, my voice cracked. "My mom said, if I don't come back, then I'm no longer their daughter. Naomi wrapped her arms around me, letting me sob out the pain. After a long while, she whispered, "No one has the right to erase you from your family because you won't take on their debt." But they already did. That night, after Naomi had gone to bed, I leaned over the small wooden desk, alone. I opened my journal, the blank page staring back. My hand trembled as I set pen to paper. Each word spilled from my chest. If they see me as a burden, then I will become something they cannot erase. I kept writing as though speaking to myself. I've been called useless, compared endlessly, erased from my own room. But they forget I still have memory, truth, and resolve. If they want to cast me aside, I will rise, not to beg forgiveness but to prove I exist. And that existence will never depend on them again. The pen stalled as my hand shook with fatigue, but the thought echoed in my mind. I closed the journal, tucked it under my pillow, and lay down. My tears soaked the fabric, but for the first time my chest held more than emptiness. There was a push inside me, like a small seed breaking through dry earth. The next morning I woke with swollen eyes. Naomi brewed coffee and placed a cup in front of me. "I don't know what to say to ease your pain. But Clarissa, you need to understand what they said doesn't define who you are." "I know, but hearing it from my own mother, it felt like being pushed to the bottom." Naomi squeezed my hand tight. "And once you've hit bottom, the only way left is up." That evening, I opened the old messages again, listened to each voicemail. Instead of breaking me, every insult now felt like living proof of the truth. I stored them all in a new folder. I even kept the journal entry, snapping a photo of the shaky words. "If they see me as a burden, then I will become something they cannot erase." I wanted it etched in memory so that if I ever weakened, I could look back and remember. I had once hit rock bottom, and it was there that I chose to rise. One afternoon, Naomi took me for a walk in the park. The cold wind blew, yellow leaves drifting down. She suddenly asked, "Clarissa, do you think you'll ever go back, face them directly?" I was silent. Images of my parents, my mother's words, "No longer our daughter," flashed in my mind. I bit my lip and whispered, "If I ever go back, it won't be to apologize. It'll be to show them how wrong they were." Naomi squeezed my hand. "That's the Clarissa I know." I knew clearly, if I didn't stand up, I'd be drowned forever. So I threw myself into work as if it were the only lifeline keeping me afloat. By day, I arrived at the office early, burying myself in files, data entry, handling every task without flaw. While coworkers complained about the monotony, I clung to it as rhythm, something to hold on to. I couldn't let my mind wander, because the moment it did, my parents' words returned, slicing me in silence. After 8 hours at the office, I didn't go home. I headed to a small cafe near the university. Naomi had introduced me to the manager. My shift started at 6 p.m. and ended around 10:30. I learned to make cappuccinos, wipe down tables, serve customers to the soft hum of jazz. At first my body ached, but soon it adapted. At night, I stumbled back to Naomi's apartment, sometimes falling asleep on the couch without even changing clothes. Each month I tracked every penny. No more expensive coffee, no new clothes. My meals circled between noodles, fried rice, and the cheapest vegetables from the store. Naomi often asked, uneasy, "Clarissa, you don't have to make it this hard on yourself." I smiled. "I don't want to ever go back begging them. The more I cut back now, the more chance I'll have tomorrow." She said nothing more, quietly packing sandwiches for me to take each morning. 4 months passed. I saved enough to put down a deposit on a tiny studio apartment in downtown St. Louis. The day I signed the lease, my hands shook with emotion. It wasn't spacious, no balcony overlooking the park, but it was mine. A space no one could strip away. In the weeks that followed, I kept both jobs. At the office, I volunteered for extra work. I enrolled in an online course at night, working toward a data management certificate. After cafe shifts, I'd stay up an extra hour with my laptop. One morning, my boss called me into his office. He handed me a folder, his voice steady. "Clarissa, I've noticed how responsible you've been with your work. And with pursuing that certificate. I want to assign you this small project as a challenge." I froze, barely believing my ears. I nodded, my heart racing. "Yes, I'll do my best." The project turned out more successful than expected. I worked myself to exhaustion, but the results were recognized. 2 months later, I received a raise. The day I got my first paycheck at the new rate, I didn't go celebrate with coworkers. I drove straight to a thrift store and bought a small wooden bed, a light gray sofa, and a desk. When the furniture was delivered to my studio, I arranged everything neatly, then sank onto the sofa with a deep breath. Back at my parents' house, every piece of furniture made me feel like an intruder. But here, every chair, every blanket was mine. I told myself, this tiny room is my territory. No one can take it away anymore. That evening, Naomi dropped by with a small vase of flowers. She set it on the table and smiled. See? You finally have a place to call home. I smiled, eyes glistening. Maybe this is the first time I've truly felt safe. Clarissa, you deserve this. And more. I didn't need my parents' approval or comparisons to Ryan. Just having a friend who saw my worth was enough to keep me moving forward. In the days that followed, I lived in a new rhythm. Waking up early, brewing coffee in my little kitchen, it felt like opening a new chapter of life. Days were busy at the office, evenings still filled with shifts at the cafe. My body was tired, but my spirit had new strength. Sometimes, sitting alone in my quiet room, I still heard my parents' cruel words echo, "Parasite, that's all a daughter is good for." But now they no longer broke me. They became fuel, a fire reminding me to keep walking, so that one day they'd see clearly I was no longer the invisible shadow in the family. At the routine partner meeting in the office, I usually only took notes and handled logistics. But when a partner company staffer suddenly lacked key data, I stepped in with the backup file I had prepared. I didn't provide the numbers, I explained exactly how to cross-check them, leaving the room silent for a few seconds. After the meeting, a tall, lean man in his 40s, sharp in a navy suit, walked over and shook my hand. He introduced himself. "I'm David Carter, HR manager at PartnerLink. I was really impressed with your preparation and how you handled that. If you're interested, I'd like to invite you to interview for an executive assistant position with us." I was so stunned I only managed a nod, my heart pounding. In my head, one question rang. Could this be the chance I've been waiting for? A week later, I walked into PartnerLink's headquarters in downtown St. Louis. The glass tower reflected the bright sunlight, worlds apart from the modest office I came from. In the interview, they asked not only about administrative skills, but also about organization, time management, and handling pressure. I answered with every bit of experience I had accumulated over the years. The long shifts, the certificate studies, the nights spent struggling alone in a tiny rental room. When I finished, David smiled. "You may not realize it, but your persistence and adaptability are exactly what we're looking for." 3 days later, I got the call. I had been offered the position of executive assistant. The salary was double my current pay. I let the phone fall onto the bed, my eyes blurring with joy. My whole body trembled, caught between dream and reality. I immediately called Naomi. "Naomi, I did it. They hired me. I knew it. Clarissa, you finally got the recognition you deserve." On my first day at PartnerLink, I wore a white blouse I'd bought from a discount rack, paired with a simple black skirt. Standing before the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Not the lost girl anymore, but a grown woman ready to step into another world. The new job opened an entirely different horizon. I attended important meetings, coordinated directly with the board, handled strategic documents. The office was bright, the colleagues professional, and most of all, they respected me. No one called me useless or a parasite. Instead, I heard, "Clarissa, your report is very clear. Thanks for preparing ahead, you made everything go much faster." Each word was a balm for wounds that had lasted years. When my first paycheck arrived, I didn't splurge. The first thing I did was visit a used car dealership. After days of considering, I chose a silver sedan, second-hand but sturdy and fuel-efficient. As I gripped the steering wheel, breathing in the faint scent of worn leather, my chest tightened with emotion. It wasn't luxury, but it was the first car I had ever bought on my own. I drove down the highway, wind rushing through the window, my heart swelling with a confidence I'd never felt before. I knew now I could drive anywhere, no longer dependent on anyone, no longer a passenger in my own life. My life brightened day by day. I decorated the tiny studio with simple things that carried my touch. A light blue rug under the sofa, small plants on the windowsill, a bookshelf against the wall. Every time I walked in, pride surged through me. This was my space, built from the money I earned from my hands and persistence. At night, sitting on the sofa with a cup of hot tea, I often wondered, if my parents saw me now, would they still dare call me a burden? While I was finding my footing, whispers about my family began to reach me. A former coworker texted, "Heard Ryan's startup is practically bankrupt. Your parents must be in trouble." I half doubted it until a few days later Naomi called to confirm, "Clarissa, I heard from my aunt back in your old neighborhood. Your parents are in real crisis. The bank's pressing them hard. Ryan's nearly out of options." Images flooded back. My father throwing the envelope on the table, my mother calling me selfish for leaving, Ryan smirking about my room. And now, the very people who cast me out were staggering under the weight of their own choices. That afternoon my phone rang. Mom flashed on the screen. I hesitated a few seconds, then picked up. Her voice came, sweet but strained. "Honey, we're having a family barbecue this weekend. Everyone will be there. Come home, let's have a nice gathering." For a moment I almost laughed. Just a week ago they treated me like a stranger, and now they were inviting me back as though nothing had happened. Before I could reply, minutes later another buzz came, a message from my father. "If you don't come, then don't bother coming back at all." The old threats returned, but I no longer felt small or powerless. I told myself, this time I won't stay silent. That night I spread everything across the desk in my studio. My laptop was open, the evidence folder on the screen. I began printing every old message. My mother calling me selfish, my father saying I was a burden, Ryan mocking me as a freeloader. The printer hummed, spitting out sheet after sheet, black ink slicing the truth onto white paper. I stacked them neatly, then opened the voicemail inbox. One by one the recordings played. My father's angry shouts, my mother's shrill tones. I listened without trembling, every word now only sharpening my resolve. I also pulled out the copy of the mortgage note Naomi had helped me obtain through a connection. The numbers glared back. The massive loan funneled straight into Ryan's startup. My parents' signatures at the bottom, irrefutable proof. Naomi stepped into the room, seeing me surrounded by papers. She frowned. "Clarissa, are you sure you want to do this? I've been silent too long. They need to see the truth. Not for my satisfaction, but so they know I'm no longer the daughter they can trample at will." "All right. If you want, I'll go with you." I squeezed her hand gently. "Thank you, but this is something I have to face myself." The next day I prepared carefully. I chose a simple yet formal outfit, a white blouse and black slacks. I wanted to appear as a grown woman, not the girl who once cowered under their scolding. I packed all the documents into a tidy briefcase, adding a USB with the recordings. Before bed, I looking around my little studio. The desk, the sofa, the bed I had bought with my own paychecks. All of it gave me strength. I whispered, "This is my home. And from here I'll face them without fear." The day of the barbecue arrived. I drove my used car, still on installments, and stopped in front of the familiar house. Smoke from the grill curled up from the backyard, laughter drifting out, stirring old memories. But instead of warmth, I felt only pretense. As I stepped through the gate, my mother was busy laying food on the table. She looked up and her face lit up as if nothing had ever happened. "Clarissa, you're here. See, in the end, family is always where you return." My father came out of the house, a beer in hand. He stared at me and spoke in his commanding tone. "Good. You're here. Then let's speak frankly." I set my briefcase down on the wooden table outside. Ryan strolled over from the corner of the yard, that smug smile still on his lips. "So you finally came back. I thought you'd abandoned us all." I looked straight into his eyes, my voice calm. "I've never abandoned anyone. But I won't let myself be used anymore." My father cleared his throat, setting his beer on the table. "Daughter, your mother and I are having trouble with the bank. Since you're here, you should help. That's a family responsibility." I opened the briefcase, pulled out a copy of the loan, and set it in front of him. "This loan was signed by you and Mom to pour into Ryan's company. Don't call it shared responsibility. This was your choice." The air froze. My mother rushed in, her voice faltering. "Clarissa, who told you that? Don't let outsiders mislead you." I cut her off, voice even but sharp. "I didn't hear it from anyone. This is a copy from the bank. Your signatures are right here." Ryan's face flushed purple, but he snapped back. What do you even know about business? Everyone faces hard times. If you're really family, you should help. I laid out the stack of printed messages before them. Here's the family love you showed me. Calling me a parasite. Saying I was nothing but a leech. Calling me selfish. And now, when everything collapses, you want me back to carry it. I pulled out my phone, playing a recording. My mother's voice rang clear and cold. If you don't come back, then you're no longer our daughter. Her face went pale. She stammered, Clarissa, I was angry then. I slowly put the phone away, my voice dropping low. Mom, some words can't be taken back once spoken. And I believed you. I believed I no longer had a place in this family. My father slammed his hand on the table, his tone hard. You dare bring this out against your parents? Who do you think you are? I'm no longer the shadow in this house. The crackle of meat on the grill suddenly sounded piercing. I saw Ryan, face flushed, lips pressed tight. He looked ready to throw out his usual mockery, but this time he stayed silent. My mother looked down at the table, her hand trembling, the glass in her grip shaking. She tried to force a smile. Clarissa, I didn't mean that. You know, we only wanted to teach you to grow up. I turned, meeting her eyes. Teach me to grow up by calling me a parasite? By stripping me of the room I built with my own hands and giving it to Ryan? By sending voicemails saying, if you don't come back, you're no longer our daughter? I played another recording. Her voice echoed, sharp and undeniable. My mother covered her face, whispering as though to swallow back her own words. I didn't know you'd kept that. My father barked, slamming the table again. Enough. Do you mean to make this family your enemy? I stayed steady, not breaking his gaze. I'm not making anyone an enemy. You pushed me out, made me an outsider. I'm only reflecting the truth. I pulled out another file and set it on the table. The copy of the mortgage, their signatures plain. My voice was deliberate. This is the real reason. You mortgaged the house to funnel money into Ryan's company. When it failed, you needed someone to patch the hole. And that someone was me. Ryan's face went pale, his voice stuttering. Don't drag the company into this. It's not related. I turned, my eyes cutting like blades. Not related? You lived off the mortgage on this house, the house they once promised was our family's home. And when I asked for a shred of respect, all I got was your smirk. Ryan clenched his fists but stayed silent. For perhaps the first time, he had no defense. My father shot me a furious look, trying to overpower. No matter what, you're still our daughter. Your duty is to stand with family in hard times. Family? The family that said I no longer existed? The family that wiped every trace of me from my old room to put Ryan's computer in it. I saw him falter, his eyes flickering with unease before anger swallowed it again. My mother broke into sobs, her voice choking. Clarissa, we were wrong. But now we really need you. I looked at her, my heart twisting, but I wouldn't let myself soften. I once needed a hug, a word of encouragement, a little fairness. You never gave me that. Don't expect me now to be the shadow covering your failures. I pulled out one last file, heavy as stone. Laying it open on the table, the numbers and signatures were clear. This is proof I've withdrawn my name from all the joint accounts and bills you once forced me to sign at home. My father's eyes blazed red, his voice rising. You dared? Do you know how important that was? I know. But Dad, from the start you never cared how it affected me. You only needed a name to carry Ryan's risks. Now that name is gone. My mother's face drained of color, her hand shaking on the edge of the table. Clarissa, doing this is the same as abandoning the whole family. You called me invisible. From now on, live as though I truly am. My father shot up, his chair crashing back, roaring. You think you can walk away from family that easily? I calmly gathered the files, closing each page. My voice was steady, unwavering. Family walked away from me first. Today, I'm only returning the favor. I turned and walked out in silence. Each step on the wooden floor thudded like a drumbeat of release. I never looked back. Behind me, my mother's sobs, my father's fists pounding the table, Ryan's suffocating silence. All faded as I opened the door and breathed in the cold air. The sky was painted with sunset, the last light stretching my shadow long across the path. I paused on the steps, glancing once at the house that held my childhood, my scars, the years I was branded a burden. Then I stepped down, my shoes striking the concrete with finality. I opened the car door, slid inside, and shut it. The click sealed off every tie behind me. As I started the engine, I caught their blurred figures in the kitchen window. They still held their places as though the house had lost its final pillar. I drove off, the road ahead opening wide. This time it wasn't escape. This time I truly left behind a family that once called me invisible. And now they would live with the truth of their own words. When my life had begun to settle into calm, Naomi walked into my studio with a look of concern. She set a bag of groceries on the table, dropped onto the sofa, and faced me. "Clarissa, have you heard?" I looked up from my laptop, smiling faintly. "Heard what?" "The old house. It has a for sale sign. Your parents couldn't keep up with the mortgage. People in the neighborhood have been talking all week." Naomi added, "Ryan isn't there either. I heard he moved in with a friend. Your parents rented a tiny 2-bedroom apartment on the west side. Old, cramped." In my mind flashed the image of the birthday dinner table, my father throwing the envelope at me. For years they thought I was the shadow they could erase. Now they were the ones leaving the fortress they thought unshakable. One evening, driving home, I passed through the old neighborhood. The tree-lined street was the same, but the sight stopped me cold. The house I grew up in was shrouded in silence, the lawn unkempt, windows shuttered. On the front yard, a for sale sign staked deep, its red letters glowing under the fading sun. I pulled over and stayed in the car, my chest tight. Not from regret for the house, but from the flood of memories. Dinners filled with comparisons, nights swallowing tears in silence. The night I walked away with only a few bags. I rolled the window down, cool air brushing my face. My lips parted in a whisper. "You wanted me gone. Now I really am." Relief washed through me as though I'd set down a weight I'd carried for years. I restarted the car and drove off. I didn't look back. Weeks later, I moved into a new apartment. Not the tiny studio anymore, but a 1-bedroom glowing with sunlight on the 3rd floor of a modern building near downtown. Wide windows opened to the blue St. Louis sky, flooding the room with gold each morning. On the first day, I placed my desk by the window, the laptop that had carried me through countless late-night studies resting on it. I set the sofa in the corner, hung small paintings I'd bought from the weekend art market. Simple but warm, full of my own presence. That first morning, I brewed coffee, set it beside my laptop. The sunlight lit my face, reflecting in the screen before I turned it on. My fingers rested on the keyboard. Outside, the city stirred awake, and so did I. The past no longer dragged me back. Only the present and future remained, chapters one would write myself. In the golden light, I knew I had truly stepped out from the shadow of that old house into a new life, where I decided everything. Perhaps what lingers isn't the loss of a home, but the lesson of rising from the very rejection of those closest to me. Sometimes, it's that letting go that shows us our true strength. And I want to ask you, if you were in my place, what would you do? Would you stay silent and endure, or would you walk away once to reclaim your worth? Every family carries stories left unspoken, shadows no one dares touch. But from them we learn what boundaries mean, what real love is, and what makes a true home. Share your thoughts below. Your story may reach someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to follow the channel so we can keep exploring stories of family, kinship, and the strength that keeps us moving forward in life.